Welcome back to another Micmac Tabletop review. Today we'll be taking a look at how a shotgun barrel rib height can be increased cheaply and easily. Here are a few of my own shotguns. You note that they all have some sort of vented rib with either a bead or fiber optic sight on them. You'll also note that they all have the addition of an aluminum rib to increase their height. Here's my wife's Mossberg International Silver Reserve 28 gauge with a 1/4 inch rib. Here's my Franke 12 gauge semi-automatic with a 5/8 inch additional rib. And here's my Beretta 686 with a 3/8 inch additional rib. I made and added these ribs myself. The materials and tools needed were mostly what I already had or what were readily available from my local hardware store. The cost to do these myself was about $75 for all three. The purpose of this video is to show you how I was able to increase the shotgun barrel rib height cheaply and easily using just basic tools. Now here's my Mossberg 12 gauge International Silver Reserve shotgun. It needs a higher rib. So let's use it to demonstrate how to add a rib. Now, except for some of the more expensive adjustable stock shotguns, most shotguns just don't fit me very well. It's like why I can't usually find an off-the-rack suit that fits me. Just like there's nothing really wrong with the suits, there's nothing really wrong with the shotguns either, except they don't fit me. My problem is that I have long arms and a long neck. Some things like length of pull can be improved fairly easily, such as with replacing the butt plate or adding a spacer to increase length of pull. With most shotguns, I need about a 14 5/8 inch length of pull. On most shotguns, adding a 1/2 inch spacer will usually do it. I've added spacers and pads to some of my shotguns, but the odd pad on my Franke Inertia semi-automatic would require considerable stock work, so I just live with it. Perhaps more important to me, and the subject of this video, is the height of the rib or height of the stock's comb, depending on how you want to look at it. Whatever, when I shoulder and sight down most shotguns, I see way too much rib. If I try to adjust my head position to compensate, I risk getting a cheek bruise that can often last for days. I've been told that I need the stock customized for a better fit, or that I need a higher rib. Sort of like raising a bridge or lowering the water. Even this Franke semi-automatic came with spacers to adjust the stock's angle, which really helped, but still wasn't quite enough. But grinding down the comb on my shotgun stock seems radical to me. Raising the height of the rib sounds maybe easier, and there are companies that will sell you a rib that you can add to your shotgun. They attach by either mechanical fasteners or double-sided tape. They can be had on all sorts of lengths and heights, and there are even adjustable height solutions. Prices start at around $175 for a basic stock rib, and they will usually offer to install one on your gun for a few more bucks. There are gunsmiths in my area that offer that service, again, for a fee. Sounds like a solution. The problem was that I really wasn't sure what I needed. How high should this rib be, for example? How do I know that adding a rib will solve my problem and improve my performance? Wouldn't it be nice if you could test out adding a rib first? Well, actually, you can, and here's how. But before we go further, let's make sure this gun is cleared first, and by the way, if you enjoy this review, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I know there are plenty of videos out there on how to determine what height you need, but I'll tell you the process I used to decide the best height for me. It involved about 6-inch long pieces of 1/4 inch square wood rod, some double-sided tape, some masking tape, and a soda straw. The idea was to use the 1/4 inch wood rods to raise the point of sight at the receiver. At this point, I'm not really concerned about the end of the barrel sight. I'll deal with that later. I've cut the straw to about 6 inches. The double-sided tape adds about a 1/16 inch in height and can hold the wood rod to the gun during the process. I'm using the masking tape to fasten the straw to the top of the wood rod. What I'm trying to do here is raise and lower the straw until I've found the sweet spot when I'm properly shouldering the shotgun. Now I can shoulder the shotgun, and if I see straight down the straw, I know that the height is about right where it should be. When you try this yourself, you can add additional square wood rods or layers of double-sided tape to get it to where you see straight down the straw. Shoulder the gun comfortably to your cheek with your eyes closed and your head up and straight. Then open your eyes and see if you're looking down the straw. Do this several times till you're convinced it's right. It should feel natural. I've been told that the closer you can get to this outcome, the better. Knowing this height is good, but it has limited use if you plan to make your own rib, because you'll be confined to what's available in the raw stock you'll use to make your rib. Keep this in mind as you make your adjustments. This Mossberg 12-gauge Silver Reserve, for example, has a 5/16 wide rib on it, and already checked on what's available in aluminum rod and bar dimensions. There's a 5/16 inch square rod and not much else available. So I'm pretty much limited to this 5/16 inch plus the 16th inch double-sided tape height increase if I want to match the rib's width. And fortunately, as it turns out, using the straw method to test it, that 3/8 inch total increase actually works pretty well for me. With this information, I can move on to creating a temporary test rib. To make a prototype test rib, I'll need strips of 1/4 inch square balsa wood cut fairly close to the length of the barrel's current rib. Note that this strip has already been colored with black marker because I've used it on other rib projects. It's only 24 inches in length, but that'll do for a prototype rib. I'll need a small nail with a finished head, a little bit of white paint, black electrical tape, double-sided tape, and again, the soda straw. It would have been great if I could have found 5/16 inch square balsa wood rods, but I couldn't. Of course, I could have ripped my own wood strips to the right dimensions from a good piece of straight pine stock, but for this prototype test rib, only the height is really important at this time, so working with a 1/4 inch square rod will do just fine for now. From my earlier tests with the soda straw, I believe that 5/16 inch plus 1/16 inch of tape or 3/8 inch total additional height would work fine for this gun. I wasn't absolutely positive about that, but it was a good place to start. Now basically I've cut a strip of 1/4 inch square wood rod to about the length of the existing rib, beveling the receiver end to match the existing lines of the gun. I've drilled a clearance hole where the current center bead is, but I'll install this prototype rib just in front of the current fiber optic site, and I'll attach it so that no clearance hole is needed there. I centered the small nail at the front end to act as a sighting bead. I added multiple layers of white paint to the nail head until it formed a visible bead. I could have used the brass bead I bought for the project, but its stem is short for attaching to wood and could be easily lost during testing. As I said, I already have used the black marker to blacken the wood. I added 3 small strips of double-sided tape to the underside of the wood rib, but left a protective covering on the underside of the tape itself. Now note that there are actually 2 layers of double-sided tape here on this 1/4 inch square rod to give me the final additional rib height of 5/16 plus 1/16 inch or 3/8 inch total. Using electrical tape, I centered and temporarily taped this wood rib to the gun's rib. Shouldering the gun and sighting down the wood rib, it already seems better. Then I taped the straw on top of the wood rib as I did before, shouldered the gun and sighted down the straw. Remember that I was told if I shouldered the gun properly with my head straight and the comb of the stock to my cheek, I should see straight down the straw. So as you try this, you should close your eyes, shoulder the gun, then open your eyes and look. As before, do this as many times as you need until you determine if you need to add or subtract height. Remove the straw and test the prototype rib again. Hopefully, you're comfortable with what you see. Do this multiple times. Now, to really test this sight configuration out, with the straw removed, secure the wood rib with more electrical tape at the points of the double-sided tape. Once secure, you can take the shotgun to a sporting clay range for real field testing. Now, from my personal experiences with the wood rib attached, I could definitely tell whether the height was right or not by my performance, my comfort, and the bruises or lack thereof. Even my wife had much improved performance with just a 1/4 inch higher wood rib on her Mossberg 28 gauge. And the good news is there's no hurry to commit to a rib. You could carry a shotgun with a wood rib for months if you wanted, and I actually did on this Beretta 686, until I was confident on the height. I shot hundreds of shells in a variety of conditions until I was very, very sure. Once I was ready, I could move on to adding a more enduring solution. Now that I'm ready to replace the temporary wood rib, I have two choices. I can now confidently order a rib from one of the many companies that offer this service, or I can make my own. If I were just outfitting one shotgun, or if I couldn't find the necessary raw aluminum stock needed to make my own, I'd be tempted to just place an order for one and be done with it. Most of these companies have a pretty good live customer help service to assist you and make the process easier. And now that I've convinced myself through actual experience with the temporary wood rib, I've got a better idea of what I really need. Most of these companies will give you a choice of beads and even add mid beads if you like. The dimensions, like the width of the current rib and how the rib conforms to the gun, can be well matched with their stock ribs or custom fitted if needed. These are typically aluminum ribs with fairly good tough finish. These ribs can be vented and made higher and lighter than what you can make yourself. There are even adjustable ribs available. Most suggest fastening with double-sided tape. Some offer mechanical fasteners. You can also use black silicone adhesive. And by the way, you can remove a rib fastened with double-sided tape in the future by using fishing line. I've done it myself and there's absolutely no harm to the gun. However, because the height I seem to need is fairly short, 3/8 inch or less, and because I have several shotguns that need this solution, I'm going to make the ribs myself. And as it turned out, it was a fairly inexpensive and easy process. Once you know the rib height, you need to obtain the aluminum stock you'll need for the project. The length and the width of the existing rib, along with the additional height, will provide the dimensions needed. In my case, these dimensions were, as expected, different between guns. And as I pointed out earlier, there are limits regarding the availability of aluminum stock. My local hardware store only carried square 1/4 inch aluminum rod, which was fine for my wife's 28 gauge Mossberg, but I needed square 5/16 inch rod for my Franke 12 gauge and this Mossberg 12 gauge, and 1/4 inch by 3/8 inch bar for my Beretta 686. You'll find that there are a number of online sources for metal bar and rod. I chose aluminum because it's easier to work with than steel and lighter. Even aluminum 5/16 square rod with double-sided tape will add about 4.5 ounces of weight. I chose metalsdepot.com because they offered a pretty good selection of the sizes I needed, and they'll cut to any length. The metal itself isn't expensive. One 28 inch 5/16 square rod cost under $8. However, shipping costs at about $30 isn't cheap, so order whatever you think you need all at once to avoid paying more on shipping. Ordering an extra rod for backup would be cheap and a smart thing to do. I suggest you check out the different online suppliers until you find what you need, or at least close enough for your project. One warning regarding metalsdepot.com: once they have your contact information, be prepared to receive tons of ads from them. So to make the rib, basically in addition to the metal rod or bar, you'll need a few more items to make an aluminum rib. I suggest a hacksaw, a rasp file, and other metal files. You may need to order a front bead if you don't have a plan to remove and reuse the existing one. Amazon has them for about $12. You can even get Midway beads from Brown's for about $14 each. Midway USA Gun Supplies has both for about $6 each. depending on the beads, you'll probably need to tap the threads. So in my case, I also needed a number 356 plug tap and a number 45 drill bit for the midway bead, and a number 648 plug tap and a number 36 drill bit for the front bead sight, a T-handled tap wrench and an electric drill, and some semi-permanent Loctite. In addition, I needed a center punch, a hammer, pliers, double-sided tape, a new razor blade for trimming, and of course some flat black spray paint. I measured the length of the gun's rib and decided how I would terminate the end toward the receiver. My shotguns were all different, but my goal was to try to match the lines of the guns. Using the hacksaw, I cut the length and trimmed the end toward the receiver. Using the metal files, I cleaned up and finished the edges on the rear and the front of the rib. Using the location of the existing sights as a guide, I marked on top where the new sights would be placed. If the existing sights were a bead, I left them and marked and drilled clearance holes on the underside of the new ribs so that the rib could fit over the old beads. In the case of a fiber optic sight, I removed the old sights so it could be used on the new rib. They just twist off counterclockwise. Next, I carefully centered, drilled, and tapped for the new sights. There's a front and midway bead on this project. Remember to set these locations so as to miss any clearance holes on the underside. The rod is aluminum, so be careful not to drill too deep. After tapping in the threads for the beads, I'm testing the beads for fit. Looks very good. Removing the beads, I can move on to machining the top of the rail. Then with the rib and a vise, I carefully scored the top surface with a wood rasp file, pulling the rasp at an angle where the teeth were aligned to give vertical line gouges across the rib's top surface. This was my best effort at creating a machined anti-glare surface. Final edge filing deburred any roughness before painting. Then I cleaned the rib with denatured alcohol and applied 2 coats of flat black paint. The new rib is already looking pretty good. After waiting for 24 hours, I installed the sights using semi-permanent Loctite. Again, this is aluminum, so don't over-tighten when installing the bead. Note that the threads are tiny, soft, and delicate. Double-sided tape is now applied to the underside of the new rib. Note that there's 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch wide 3M auto double-sided molding tape. You can use the narrower 1/4 inch tape, but in this case, because the new rib is 5/16 inch wide, I'm using the wider 1/2 inch tape that I'll need to trim, but I want the better adhesion of the wider tape. Using the new razor blade, I've trimmed off the excess double-sided tape. Before I remove the red plastic shield from the double-sided tape, I used black electrical tape to fasten the new ribs to the gun and shoulder the gun, testing it for fit, just to be sure, one more time. Perfect. After cleaning the gun's old rib surface with denatured alcohol, the new rib with its double-sided tape exposed can now be carefully centered and attached on top of the gun's old rib. And that's basically it. Looks good. Now before we end today's video, if you haven't already, be sure to like, share, and subscribe down below. And thanks for watching, and I hope you found this video to be helpful. I think these higher rib solutions look pretty good, and more importantly, they provide a good economical solution to my problem of shotgun fit. My shooting performance has certainly improved, and I no longer fear a bruised cheek. But I should mention a couple of points here. The painted surface on these do-it-yourself ribs is their main weakness compared to the professionally made ribs, and there's a chance due to availability of materials that the fit may not be as perfect. But otherwise, they do what they're supposed to do. And you can easily remove them if you'd like with a bit of fishing line pulled through the double-sided tape. The remaining gooey stuff just rubs off without harm. By the way, if you leave the midway bead on an old rib, you may want to remove the front bead so that you can more easily get fishing line through the tape in front and behind the mid bead. Just thinking ahead. Okay, now I've added ribs to 4 shotguns so far, including my wife's Mossberg 28 gauge at her request. Her performance improvement with the raised rib was dramatic. In terms of all materials and supplies, I believe I spent less than $100 to add all 4 ribs. That works out to about $25 each. Given that even a new professionally made stock rib would have cost at least $169 plus shipping, I calculated that I've probably saved about $600 so far. And truthfully, these ribs I've added are all working very well. So much so that I'm thinking I might as well add one to my old Mossberg 500. And my daughter-in-law also has a Mossberg 28 gauge. I wonder if she would like a raised rib too. I'm pleased with the results I've obtained by adding these ribs to my shotguns, and I really hope you found this video to be useful. At the very least, perhaps you've been able to determine if a higher rib on your shotgun might work for you. If so, perhaps this video has encouraged you to try making one yourself. Meanwhile, remember that any weapon you carry is better than the one you left at home. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll be back for my next tabletop review. Until next time, stay safe.